What's going on, guys? Boss6 here, back to your video, and today I'm here to do my NFL Week 5 predictions. Jesus, Lord have mercy, what is going on with this season? Now, September football is usually a shit show. Now we're transitioning into October where things are going to be a little more figured out. Hopefully the play is not going to be quite as sloppy per se. But then again, we can never really have anything nice when it comes to the NFL, especially at this rate. So, yeah, it's going to be how Week 5 is going to be, because Week 4, I think I did a little bit better on my predictions. There were some upsets of the week, but there were some games that I just didn't know how they were going to go. So, yeah, this one's going to be an interesting week, and, yeah, without further ado, let's get right into these predictions. Starting off with the Thursday Night Football game, we have an NFC South matchup. We have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Atlanta Falcons. Both these teams had a big win last week. The Bucs, good golly, Miss Molly, did they ever have a defensive showcase against the Philadelphia Eagles? They laid waste to that offense. Granted, the Phillies' offense is really nothing too special, especially right now. But my God, that defense, especially when the defense has been showing some cracks, especially with some injuries, that defense just laid waste, especially in the first quarter where they allowed 0 points at all, which is absolutely insane. Well, 0 yards too, but that's absolutely insane. Baker Mayfield basically picking up where he left off, especially a couple of weeks ago. And just the Bucs are just looking like a really damn good football team. It's really nice to see how this team has been, especially that they were kind of floundering for the past couple seasons. Meanwhile, they're taking on the Falcons, who Younghoe Koo is an Atlanta legend. That's literally all I'm going to say. From 56 or 58 yards, Younghoe Koo is an absolute beast in his own right. And Atlanta pulling off a big win over the New Orleans Saints. Kirk Cousins had himself a pretty solid game, even though he did have a bad interception. But they had a pretty sluggish match against New Orleans, where it looked a little dire there for the Falcons. But again, Younghoe Koo is a god. So, yeah, I'm curious to see how this matchup's going to be, because both these teams are basically battling to see who's going to be the best in the NFC South, even though statistically it's the Bucs in this one. So, I'm curious how Atlanta's going to hold their own against this Bucs defense. But I think Tampa Bay is going to be just the better team overall. I'm going to go with the Buccaneers with this one. I think that Baker's going to have a really solid game. But Atlanta has been having some upside, at least lately. So I'm going to go with the Bucs with this one. But Atlanta should make this a pretty competitive game. Then we're going to go all the way across the ocean, across the pond to good old London for the New Jersey Jets versus the Minnesota Vikings. The Jets, what was that on Sunday? My God, that game against the Broncos. It's like Nathaniel Hackett never left as the head coach. Like, you got outbeaten by Bo Nix, who had -7 yards in the first half. I don't understand football at this point. Yes, I can understand the Broncos' defense is actually really damn good, but their offense is pretty lackluster if you ask me. Meanwhile, with the Jets, I have no idea what's going on. Like, yeah, your defense is good, but your offense, which is supposed to be Super Bowl contender, is lacking in some ways. Aaron Rodgers got sacked 5 times. Garrett Wilson almost got no targets at all in the game. And just the offense couldn't do a damn thing. Like, it was very, very, very odd and very concerning, if you ask me. They're taking on the Vikings, who are just steamrolling their way in the NFC. They're one of 2 undefeated teams right now, along with the Kansas City Chiefs. And they put on a master first half against the Green Bay Packers. Second half, though, looking a little scary there, especially allowing Green Bay to come back with almost 29 unanswered points. But Sam Darnold was looking absolutely perfect out there. Jordan Addison, especially Justin Jefferson, are absolutely great. And still, they're without TJ Hockenson, which I think he should be coming back here sooner than later. But, yeah, it's really nice to see the Vikings doing well. Although the defense is starting to look a little suspect, especially after that second half. But the Vikings are still a really damn good team. And also made Tom Grossi stop doing power rankings, especially after this past week. So, yeah, good job, Minnesota. You are doing your job. So, this honestly doesn't look like a fair matchup, considering that, well, yeah, the Vikings just look like the way better team, and the Jets are kind of just hanging on by a thread, especially in the AFC. So I'm going to go with the Vikings with this one because they just look like the way better team. They look like the more complete team because while, yes, the MetLife turf was terrible on Sunday, still, having Bo Nix still have negative 7 yards and still winning the game, completely inexcusable. I do think the Jets defense, I think, is just a little bit better. But Brian Flores' defensive scheme, at least as of late, is looking really damn good. So I'm going to go with the Vikings with this one. And Tom Grassi is going to probably cry. Following that, we have a bit of an interesting matchup here. We have the Carolina Panthers versus the Chicago Bears. The Panthers had a bit of a bad loss against the Cincinnati Bengals. Andy Dalton did have himself a really solid game. And the Panthers are starting to turn themselves around a little bit. And while people say that this could be the end of Bryce Young's career, I say this is what they should have been doing at the very beginning because them putting Bryce out there just looked absolutely miserable. He didn't look good at all. The offense and defense just didn't trust him. And now that they have Andy Dalton, who's been in the league for a long time at this point, the offense and defense is starting to look a lot more comfortable. Again, not wrong with putting Bryce out there in the field, but if he's going to be doing as bad as he was, you got to pull him, put him on the bench, let him learn, then he can learn how to use the playbook. But Andy Dalton is looking pretty solid despite the fact that he lost to the Bengals. Meanwhile, they're taking on the Bears, and the best game that Caleb Williams has had by far. Not perfect, not fantastic, but he did pretty damn well. And he is slowly but surely starting to progress a little bit. And who would have thought DeAndre Swift had a breakout game because he was looking so completely terrible, especially in the first few games where he just looked completely washed. He didn't look like he knew what he was doing. He was getting no help from the offensive line. And while, yes, they were going up against a battered Rams team, they did enough to where they had to win, and they just had to pick the bones, essentially. So they basically had to do what they can. They're 2-2 right now. They're looking pretty solid. Let's just hope that if that momentum could keep up, especially when they're going up against a pretty inept Panthers team. So I'm willing to bet the Bears are going to win this game, but you can never count out Andy Dalton nowadays for some weird reason. So I think the Panthers might make a bit of a fight for this one, but I think the Bears are just an overall better team. So I'm going to give the win to Chicago here. And, 2-0, especially for the NFC North. Following that, we have an AFC South matchup. We have the Indianapolis Colts versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Colts, we are living in a society where Joe Flacco and the Lord of our Savior 2024 is throwing footballs and making touchdowns. I'm not even kidding. It was looking pretty rough for the Colts, especially the fact that, again, Anthony Richardson is out with yet another injury, hip injury, in fact, against the Steelers. And Joe Flacco, old-ass Joe Flacco, is in a football game in 2024. Apparently, life is just strange like that. The Colts still had a pretty big victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers. And while they're not leading their division, they are starting to make the AFC South crown a little more competitive at least. But the Colts are still lacking some things, especially on offense and on defense. Let's just hope that injury to Lilalo Latu is actually going to not be as bad as they thought it was, especially with DeForest Buckner, I think, still out for a little bit. Let's just hope that the Colts can kind of bounce themselves back up from having some pretty bad injuries. They're taking on the Jags, who are just absolutely horrible at this point. Trevor Lawrence is not looking like himself. They're the only winless team in the entire season. And it's just looking terrible for Duval right now. And Sean Codd is pissed. You should be more pissed at how his son is running his wrestling company, but I certainly digress. The Jags are just not looking really good. If Trip Bulky and especially Dougie P are going to be running this organization how they're running it right now, they're looking like to be canned especially by the second week of the second half of the season, because my God, they have overstayed their welcome and then some. It's not looking good for Jacksonville right now. And again, you would think with the team that is, quote, the best team that Jacksonville's ever looked, a lot is left to be desired, and this is especially one of them. So it's looking pretty bad for Jacksonville, but for some reason, Indianapolis cannot win in Jacksonville. So maybe this will reverse that curse maybe this time. but I'm just not trusting Jacksonville as of right now. So I'm going to go with the Colts with this one because I just think that maybe Joe Flacco might still have the old magic left in him. But who knows? Maybe Jacksonville's going to pull a victory out of their ass. But again, just Jacksonville's just not looking good really good right now. So I'm going to go with the Colts with this one. Following that, we have an AFC East showdown. We have the Miami Dolphins versus the New England Patriots. Oh boy. The Dolphins. It's just sad at this point. It's honestly a very sad team to see the Dolphins at this point. They literally did nothing against the Tennessee Titans. And Pro Bowler Tyler Huntley, everyone, let's give him a big round of applause for that performance. Yeah, it just does not look good for the Dolphins right now. Without Tua, this team is basically lifeless. Tyreek Hill's getting nothing out of it, and it's just not looking good, especially for the Dolphins right now. Apologies. So, yeah, it's looking pretty dire for Miami right now. They're taking on New England, who didn't have themselves a good game either against the 49ers. Jacoby Brissett is not really doing himself any favors, and this team is just having nothing for him. This is probably going to be a very, very, very ugly game, and by very ugly, this has potential to be the worst game of the entire week, and it might not even be close. I guess New England's going to pick up the victory just by sheer bullshit, but I can honestly see the Dolphins pulling this victory out, but I'm probably going to go with the Patriots with this one because, again, the Dolphins just have nothing going for them, and New England usually gets the last straw, especially with Miami, so I'll go with New England even though probably Miami's going to win this game. Following that, we have an AFC North showdown. We have the Baltimore Ravens versus the Cincinnati Bengals. The Ravens. Derrick Henry is back in full form, and it's really nice to see the King take his rightful throne as the running back king of the NFL right now. My God, Derrick Henry put on a masterful performance against the Buffalo Bills this past Sunday. And my God, that defense was running all over that offense. And a game that was not even close in the second quarter. Lamar Jackson basically didn't do anything the entire game, which you didn't really expect him to. Just let Derrick Henry just run rampant all over that offense, and the defense will do its job, most certainly. They're taking on the Bengals, who had themselves a much-needed win over the Carolina Panthers. They finally get the first win of the season. Joe Burrow had himself a really good game, even though he probably threw the worst interception I've seen all season. Like, dude, who the hell were you throwing to? That was such a bad throw. But Ja'Marr Chase, especially Chase Brown, is coming into his own. And while the defense is still lacking and the offense has been up to date, at least the Bengals are starting to find a little bit of their rhythm and still find a little bit of their groove. Now, for some reason, the Ravens can not really beat the Bengals, especially at home as of late, so it's been kind of weird to see Baltimore like this. But based off of their performance that they had on Sunday, the Ravens do have a big chance of winning this game right here. But then again, you can never count out Cincy with this game, so who knows, it might go either way, but I'm going to go with the Ravens with this one. But this should be a pretty fun game. But man, Derrick Henry, it's just so nice to see him back in his Titan days, in my opinion. But I'm going to go with the Ravens with this one and a pretty big victory. Following that, we have the Cleveland Browns versus the Washington Commanders. The Browns, yeah, it's not looking good, like, at all. And again, I feel so bad for Cleveland fans because you guys deserve a whole lot more than this season right now, because that was certainly a match between the Las Vegas Raiders, which, good golly, Miss Molly, that was the epitome of an ugly game right there. Deshaun Watson did okay, but he didn't do anything to help win the game. And not to mention, Watson is so screwed that when he threw a touchdown to Amari Cooper, it got called back for a holding. That may or may not have actually been a holding. Because NFL is fun. Yeah, it's not looking good for Cleveland right now. They're injured on offense, they're injured on defense, and it's just not looking good, like, at all. Meanwhile, they're taking on Washington, who are leading the NFC South. This year's already off to a weird start. Now, again, it is still early. It's only week 5, but Jayden Daniels is looking like Rookie of the Year so far. Like, he just laid waste to the Arizona Cardinals in a game that was not even close. And Cliff Kingsbury got his revenge against Arizona as well. So I guess it was kind of nice to see that as well. But yeah, Daniels is looking absolutely phenomenal. He's looking like one of the best rookies I've seen probably since C.J. Stroud. He's looking like the best since C.J. Stroud. And, yeah, it's just really nice to see how cool, calm, and collected he is in the pocket. Even when he's under pressure, he's not making bad throws at all. So, it's really nice to see Washington fans really come out from the filth and grime that they've been ever since Dan Snyder took over. And it's really nice to see Washington finally have a little bit of hope, especially this season. So, while I do think Washington's defense is still not really that great, their offense is going to make up for that lackluster defense. So, I'm going to go with Washington with this one. Just the Browns are just not going to do anything of note. And, yeah, I think Washington's going to have itself another fun game, and Jayden Daniels is going to have himself another good game. So, I'm going to go with the Commanders with this one. Next up, this should be a fun matchup. We've got the Buffalo Bills versus the Houston Texans. The Bills, that was bad. That was pretty bad on Sunday. And I do apologize for not actually commentating the game against the Ravens and Bills because, well, I was hanging out with my dad, and my dad wanted to watch it. I'm kind of glad I didn't commentate because, good God, that was just a bad defensive performance. That defense was not good against that offense, and the offense was struggling against that defense. Josh Allen did everything he could to keep the game intact, but the game was not even close, especially by the third. He did make a couple good throws, but he's getting banged up along with the offense and the defense, and it doesn't help that they keep giving themselves penalties. Keon Coleman, he's trying, but not really clicking so far. But, again, that defense was all over him. There was some bad drops, especially with Shakir and especially with Kincaid as well. But even Al even said in the post-match interview that they were a hot team coming into that game and they got their ass kicked. And that's literally what it is. They are leading their division still. Let's just hope that they can just pick themselves back up, dust themselves off, and go up against the Houston Texans, who have this little guy by the name of Stephon Diggs. I don't know if you guys know him at all, but he was pretty good with football. He might be a little bit iffy nowadays, but he might be familiar to some Buffalo fans. But I digress. The Texans had a pretty close game against Jacksonville. It was looking really, really, really close there. Again, C.J. Stroud was looking pretty solid throughout. Stephon Diggs was doing good. And Dare Ogunbowale is still looking like a pretty damn good running back after all these years. So I'm curious to see how this game is going to go because this can go one of either way. They're both 3-1 right now. And again, this is a potential match of the year candidate right now. So I'm curious to see how this game is going to go. I hate to break it to Buffalo fans because I really want Buffalo to win this game so they can kind of stick it to Diggs with this one. But based off of the performance they had on Sunday, I'm going to go with the Texans with this one because, again, Buffalo's defense is really lacking. But maybe Buffalo can finally find their groove, pick themselves back up, and dust themselves off after having a pretty bad loss to the Ravens. But I think the Texans are just a better team overall. So I'm going to go with Houston with this one, but this should be a very fun game. And then we have an AFC West showdown. We have not the Baltimore Ravens, Jesus. We have the Las Vegas Raiders versus the Denver Broncos. Both these teams came out with shocking wins, if you ask me. The Raiders had a pretty big win over the Cleveland Browns. And keep in mind, this is without Davante Adams, and this was without Max Crosby. And speaking of Davante Adams, oh boy, those trade rumors are coming up yet again. And there's two potential spots he might be going to, either the Jets or the Saints, because of the teams that he's played for. Or the players he's played for, most particularly. And if so, that's going to be a big loss to the Raiders because, yeah, Gardner Minshew really wasn't doing all that good. But somehow, shockingly, they won because Cleveland just flat out blows. So, yeah, they kind of escaped by their own luck in a way. But, yeah, the Raiders are not looking so hot right now. They're taking on the Broncos, who, again, had the ugliest win of the entire year. And by ugliest, I mean one of the worst wins I've ever seen a team win. I mean, seriously, that was literally the equivalent of the Jets win against the Giants last year. Like, that was such an ugly, terrible win that it wasn't even funny. So, yeah, it's not looking that good right now, especially for the Broncos, but hey, a win's a win, I guess. So this is probably going to be an ugly game. It's probably going to be defensive heavy. And I guess the Broncos are going to win because their defense, I think, is better. And again, the Raiders are really lacking some key players. Again, especially with Crosby still being out for a little bit. So it's going to be interesting to see how this game goes. But I think the Broncos are going to win because, again, their defense, I think, is better in my opinion. But this is going to be an ugly game. But I'm going to have Denver go over with this one. Following that, you have an NFC West showdown. You have the Arizona Cardinals versus the San Francisco 49ers. The Cardinals, that was a pretty bad loss to the Commanders. Kyler Murray almost did nothing in the entire game. Marvin Harrison Jr. was damn near not on the field. And they just got their ass handed to him. That's literally all that happened. But again, this Cardinals team is scrappy and they're going to make it competitive. This was one of the times where it really wasn't, in my opinion. They're taking on the Niners, who had a much-needed win over the New England Patriots. Brock Purdy had himself a really damn good game. And Jawan Jennings and George Kittle were doing really damn good, despite the fact Kittle, I think, is still a little bit banged up. And Debo's Debo. And yeah, they're still without Christian McCaffrey. But they're still pulling off big wins, even without CMC in the back. So this could honestly be a very competitive game because, again, the Cardinals, even though they lost, they still make it competitive. So this can go either way, if you ask me personally. But I'm going to go with the 49ers for this one because I think the 49ers are really starting to find their groove. They're picking themselves back up. And they're starting to look really, really, really solid. But, again, never count out Arizona. So yeah, I think Arizona's going to make this a competitive game, but I do think the 49ers are going to have themselves a pretty big win on this one. Excuse me. Meanwhile, we have the New Jersey Giants versus the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, Giants, it's not looking good, like, at all. You had one of the ugliest games, and by ugliest, I mean one of the most bland games against the Dallas Cowboys. Granted, you could have won if you would have scored a damn touchdown, but that's besides the point. Oh, and also Malik Neighbors, your number one wide receiver, is out with a concussion. Hooray! God, jeez, this team is just not doing anything. I mean, Daniel Jones is not looking bad. I'll give him that. But, yeah, it's not looking good, like, at all for the Giants, and they have nothing going for them. Meanwhile, they're taking on the Seahawks, who had themselves a solid game against the Lions, but the Lions were just a way, way, way better team. And Geno Smith had himself a good game, even though that they are starting to lose some key players, especially on the O-line and on the defense. Kenneth Walker came out, had a pretty solid game, and DK Metcalf had himself a pretty good game. And Geno was doing good, all things considered. It's just they just got outclassed by the Detroit Lions, who finally beat them in a way. So, yeah, the Seahawks, they're still 3-1. They're still leading their division. And I think they're going to continue that lead because I think they're beating the Giants in this one. I just don't see the Giants making this a game at all. So, I think Seattle's got himself a pretty easy victory here. And yeah, I just think the Seahawks are just going to whip the Giants left, right, and center. Following that, we have the Green Bay Mother-Loving Packers versus the Los Angeles Rams. The Packers, that was a pretty rough loss to the Minnesota Vikings. I'm starting to think Jordan Love came back a little too soon. And by a little too soon, I mean I think he came back way too early because he did not look good at all. Yes, he threw some touchdowns, but they were mainly in garbage time, if you ask me. But he had some pretty bad picks. And again, that O-line and especially that defense was not looking good against the offense, and the offense wasn't looking good in the defense. And it doesn't help too that your kicker couldn't hit a kick even if it was from inside the 5. Yeah, the field goal units were terrible that game, but I mean they still have some bright side. But also they have Christian Watson battling a high ankle sprain. So hooray, it's everything fun in Packerland right now. Meanwhile, taking on the Los Angeles Rams, who, yeah, they're banged up too. And Matt Stafford's doing everything he can to assemble this ragtag team of a football team. But, yeah, it's not looking good for the Rams either. So this can honestly be a pretty ugly game too. But if you were to ask me who would win, I'd probably say the Packers would win because I think they still have talent, where the Rams, again, they are without a lot of their high-end talent. So, yeah, I think the Packers are going to take the victory with this one. And at least the Packers will get a win, hopefully. And then for Sunday Night Football, we have the Dallas Cowboys versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. If this was back in the 70s, it would have been good old Captain America, Roger Staubach versus Terry Bradshaw. In the 2000s, it was Tony Romo versus Big Ben Roethlisberger. Now in the Lord of our Savior 2024, it is Dak Prescott versus Justin Fields. Yeah, some of these things just doesn't click for me. The Cowboys, they came off with a very anemic win over the New York Giants, who, yeah, they just couldn't do anything on defense somehow, and yet they still won. Dallas is just not really a good team, if you ask me. And, yeah, there's a reason why they're near the bottom of the NFC East. Meanwhile, they're taking on the Steelers, who somehow lost to the Colts when they should have won, in all honesty. Like, it's weird, too, that their defense was the one reason why they were winning all their games, and yet their defense just withered out. It honestly didn't make any sense. Justin Fields, yeah, he had a bad second half, but he had a pretty good game, all things considered. And Fields is progressing. He really, really, really is. Just the main reason why he didn't pan out in Chicago is because the Chicago system is pretty bad when it comes to the QBs. So, him, especially with that O-line and that defense, is really helping out. So, yeah, it's really nice to see how Dallas, or how the Steelers are. All right, see you. Have a good day, bro. You too. Sorry, that was my dad, but yeah, it's really nice to see how Pittsburgh is going to be going against especially a pretty bad Dallas defense. So I'm curious to see how it's going to go. I want to pick Dallas, but you know what? Screw it. I'm picking Pittsburgh. I just want chaos in my life. We're going to get chaos anyway, but I'm going to be picking the Steelers, and we're going to wave them terrible towels. We're going to wave them terrible towels because Steelers, yeah! I can't do it. I'm a little too, I'm still trying to wake up from my nap that I took. But, yeah, God, that's good. If that's not a meme, I don't know what it's going to be. But I'm going to go with the Steelers with this one because I want chaos, damn it. Anyways, enough of my weirdness. I haven't taken my pills today. Anyways, going on to the Monday night game, the last game of the Week 5. We have the New Orleans Saints versus the Kansas City Chiefs. The Saints had a pretty bad loss to the Atlanta Falcons, literally losing on a game-winning kick. Derek Carr's not looking too great right now. Neither is Alvin Kamara. And not to mention, Taysom Football, a.k.a. Taysom Hill, is out with a rib injury. So, yeah, it's not looking good, especially because the Saints are battered on offense and on defense right now. So, it's not looking good for New Orleans right now. Meanwhile, they're taking on the Chiefs, who are somehow escaping their own ineptitude and escaping via Deus Ex Machina. Because since Patrick Mahomes is such a good guy, he not only threw a pick against the Chargers, but he also took out his wide receiver in the process. Oh my God. Now, I don't think Rashee Rice actually tore his ACL, but it looked like he did. But I think he nearly avoided a season-ending injury. So sad. It would have been so sad to see such a class act like Rashee Rice and total complete driving expert like Rashee Rice to be out for the season. That's such a damn shame he's going to be missing out some time. Much to the chagrin of everyone in the NFL. But again, the Chiefs always escape via their own ineptitude and their own bullshit. And I'm feeling like the Pittsburgh magic is starting to wear off on Kansas City. But how far is the bullshit going to last? We can only speculate. So, on paper, this doesn't look like a fair matchup at all because the Chiefs' defense is absolutely spectacular, but their offense is lacking. Kind of the same thing with New Orleans, but I still think the Chiefs are going to win this game, but I would honestly laugh if New Orleans wins, but I think the Chiefs are going to win this game because we can't have nice things in the NFL. But, again, Mahomes is not playing really well. He has thrown a pick every single game he's been in. and it's not looking all that great so far. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs with this one because God hates us all. So, folks, that is it for my NFL Week 5 predictions. Who do you think is going to win this week? Let me know in the comment section below. Make sure you guys leave a like, leave a comment, tap the big red subscribe button, and tap the bell so when I upload, you guys will be notified. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Most importantly, join the herd. Talk to you in the next video. Peace out.